Hey guys, I'm still hard at work on the GE800 TV, but I wanted to make a little video on some recent finds. And they are Predicta related, and I know that's popular. But before we get into this, a little backstory. You may recall some months ago I picked up this Predicta Siesta television that was just incredibly filthy. But it's cleaning up quite nicely. Haven't done anything on the electronics yet, but one issue I could tell, unfortunately, very unfortunately, this pitch tube has a problem. It tests really good, tests like brand new, and it is a replacement. But unfortunately, at some point the vertical deflection system failed, and it collapsed to a very thin, very bright line, and somebody kept using the TV. Some people would just use the set until as it died, and they would just do it for the audio, just to keep them company, maybe listen to a ball game or something, and not turn the brightness down, as it just seared a line in. So this is burned in so bad with the set off, it's quite visible, so I don't doubt when the set is turned on, it will be very visible. Now I say it's a real shame because it tests so good, and these things are fairly hard to find. Now, the original picture tubes are really shallow. This one, I'm kind of surprised because from the specifications, it's quite a bit longer than the original, but it just did fit so they could put the original back on. That's the problem with replacements. There were a lot of 17-inch, 110-degree deflection CRTs made, and that's what's in here. But the necks had varying lengths, and when the Predicta first came out, that was their big breakthrough, which turned out to have some issues because, well, the picture tubes had some flaws in them. They didn't necessarily work so well, but they had really short necks. And unfortunately, they also had a very short life, as oftenly. So that may have been what happened with this. The original picture tube burned out. Somebody put in this replacement, even though it just barely fits in there. And then unfortunately got burned. So anyways, what I'm getting at is I've been on the lookout for a replacement, and this showed up on eBay. People ask me where I find replacement picture tubes, often on eBay, and yeah, you're going to pay. Otherwise, there's Moyer Electronics that occasionally has picture tubes. There's the Early Television Foundation website that has a classified section. And occasionally you stumble across one on Craigslist or at a swap fest, or if often you'd buy a beat up set just to salvage a picture tube out of. But anyways, this just showed up on eBay as a new old stock picture tube, 17 DHP4, 110-degree deflection. The pinout I believe is identical, but and it does have a short neck, not quite as short as the original Predicta, but shorter than the one that's in there. So I think this should be good. Now this actually, I didn't realize when I bid on it, came from Moyer Electronics. Moyer Electronics is an electronics reseller, wholesaler. They sell electronic parts and stuff. And they've been in business a long time, long enough to actually have old TV parts. And occasionally they list them on eBay, and that's what this was listed at. It was listed as new old stock. I could see right away when I opened it, it's dirty, but I think that's just from the box being open and dirt getting inside. I don't think it's actually been used. I wanted to point out something about this box I thought was interesting. So I've gotten a few picture tubes over the years in original boxes, and often they say this. So printing on the side is this way. Everything's reading correctly. Sylvania. Original box, cool to have, and it's falling apart, unfortunately, but kind of a cool thing to have. But then, check this out. Remove and insert tube from other end. Well, wait a minute. When you pick this up, you can tell it's bottom heavy, which means the front of the picture tube's down here, which is how they're often stored, shipped around, and you can see somebody open and resealed it from this end. So why do they say remove and insert tube from the other end? Well, let's see how it's packed inside here. It's a honeycomb support, just a grid of corrugated double thickness cardboard, and the picture tube's just sitting in there. Well, when it's face down, one, you reach in there to get it out, people may be inclined to grab the neck, which can very well snap off. But also, in at least one instance, I've had a picture tube that tested really good until I looked at the screen and saw that phosphor was ruined. Why? A little bit of the gun structure, something not critical to the operation, a little bit of one of the support pillars, broke loose, fell onto the back of the phosphor, and from the tube getting knocked around, just scored the heck out of it. Knocked about half of the phosphor off. I don't think that's a really common issue, but it's something in the back of my mind because it happened to me once, so I like to store them the other way around. Hey, it looks like the warranty card might still be in here. Another thing that happens often with these boxes is somebody takes their TV in, gets a new picture tube, they put the old one in the box. May have some life left, or back then people were very thrifty, so they take it. Plus you could get it rebuilt, potentially. So you go to estate sales, you stuff listed on eBay, it says, oh, new in box. No, it's a dud in box, so you got to be careful. Now this came from a reputable place, and I believe they said they did test it before they sold it, so unless it was damaged in shipping, it should be good. Cool, I haven't seen one of these before. I've gotten some RCA warranty things, but not Sylvania before. Silver Screen 85, that was their line of aluminized picture tubes in the 50s. Aluminized meaning there's a super thin layer of aluminum over the back of the phosphor, which would prevent ion burn and make this phosphor glow a little bit brighter. Well, not so much the phosphor would glow brighter, but more of the light would get reflected towards the viewer. Alright, so there's one thing left. Test this puppy. Okay, here we go. Yeah, filament glow. Now I'll be blunt. Yeah, these can be expensive. In this case, I don't remember exactly what I paid. I think it was $125 or something like that. Buy it now, plus $85 shipping. Yeah, they they do charge a bit for shipping, and I think part of that is them testing out the tube. It was double boxed. It was well packed. But Predictas are popular, picture tubes are scarce. You're going to pay a premium for them. This is a very common thing I see when you have a black and white picture tube that's been sitting around for decades, probably without being used. Is a cutoff and emissions jump around a little bit for a few minutes. But it is responding. It's sort of like the contrast control on a TV. And we have good emissions. And I suspect if I do a life test, it cuts the filament power by something like 40%. And if it's a really fresh, strong cathode, that needle won't move much, if at all. So here we go. Yeah, that's a pretty solid life test there. So yes, indeed. And Moyer's pretty reputable. If there was a problem with this, I expect I could get a refund. This is the only one they have, and it could be quite a while before they find one. Altogether, there are, I think, like 8 or so 17-inch picture tubes that will work on a Predicta with the neck being short enough to fit in. And there's another 8 or 10 that have longer necks. They are electrically and screen size compatible. So these are a bit easier to find than the 21-inch, and even the originals were more reliable. Speaking of 21-inch, that's the other little part of this tail. I think the more interesting half. Alright, so what else we got? Well, before you judge anyone too harshly, just have to accept the fact that old TVs and old radios are going to get repurposed. It's been happening almost since the day they were made. People take these and they repaint them, they cut the legs off, they put more modern electronics inside of them. It's people's property. They buy them, they can do with it what they please. Take some comfort in the fact that makes the remaining sets a little more valuable. And in this case, the repurposer very carefully took out the insides, knew they had some value. He was a collector himself. He had a fairly impressive collection. And he put it on eBay. And it was a local pickup. So this was way more of a gamble because he doesn't know, and I didn't know the condition of anything. I mean, I could see from the photos what was here, but I don't know if the flyback's any good. And this did come with a picture tube, which is what I really wanted, because the 21-inch picture tubes are especially hard to find. And it's a 21 FDP4, which was the official replacement for the original 21 EAP4, which had a pretty bad design flaw, and they generally had a really short life. So we'll get to that in a bit. First, look at the chassis, which I honestly haven't done very little with. I just got it the other day. I also got the speaker. It's in great shape. Not too exciting. It's a 5 or 6 inch paper cone permanent magnet speaker. So what this is the chassis out of a Predicta barber pole set, which is a very similar chassis to the holiday set. See, there's one up over there. Just reconfigured so it was in a vertically mounted case. So like imagine that on its side and then the picture tube sticking out of one end. I did a whole restoration series on one a few years ago. He said he didn't plug it in, but I could tell him right away that if he had, nothing would have happened, because this tube is gassy, this tube is most definitely gassy, and that tube is missing. In other words, this is a series strung set. Without the filaments having continuity, nothing is going to happen. At least on the filament side. You will get B+, assuming this guy is still good. So, right off the AC line, turn on the power switch, goes through this fusible resistor into this semiconductor diode voltage doubler, and it powers this up. Anyway, let's take a look at what we got here. So, this is common to, like I said, the holiday, and the tandem is quite similar. And then here's the tuner, just attached by one screw, and kind of a bent bracket here. I'm getting moved around a bit. But hey, check this out. That is a UHF tuner. Again, kind of a shame that it got repurposed, because the UHF is the least common of the models. And yeah, so the way this would be oriented is this would be the front of the set. And that's the VHF channel clunker, fine tune, and backlight for the channel indicator. And then the UHF stuck out the side of the set at a right angle. Now, it's a shame I didn't get the knobs. If you saw my recent Predicta knob video, that UHF one is especially worth something. The channel and the knobs that go, and the power and the volume and such are also have some value, but aren't quite as rare. UHF knobs being rare because, geez, I mean, I don't know what percentage came with UHF, but it's got to be less than 10%, I would think. Plus, it was a big, fancy knob with a planetary drive in it. But anyways, yeah, so that's a VHF tuner. That could work on a number of different models if it's good. This may well never have a use for, but it's an interesting thing to have. Unless I wanted to, say I ever got my hands on a pedestal set, I could always add UHF to it, drill a hole in the side, mount this, and so somebody worked on this at some point and did some ugly hacks, like stuck this electrolytic cap between one of the controls and chassis. I don't know what that's about. But it's bugging me because it's preventing me from moving this control harness. So let's just cut that wire there. There we go. This is what I wanted to get a look at. So this would be your vertical hold and linearity and brightness and horizontal hold. And one other thing that I can't think of right now. So these are concentric pots, and the way these would work is there'd be three knobs external to the set. Those would be for the more common things of brightness, vertical hold, and horizontal hold, I believe. And then if you needed to make more adjustments, you'd pull that knob off and put a small flat-bladed screwdriver down the middle to get to the lower adjustments for the less commonly used adjustments. And then this would be your power and contrast and volume. And unfortunately, power part is gone. That was a very common point of failure in these sets. This one was just ripped off. One thing I was curious to see if I trace out the wiring, because that switch often failed and replacements are a little hard to come by, what people would sometimes do is short out the AC line somewhere in here and use an external power switch to turn the set off and on. So let's see, here's the AC in, and go off over this way. Well, I'm not quite sure. Oh, you know what? It's right here. It's in my hand. That's where the power switch used to be. They wrapped it with some masking tape. Yes, that's not a good idea. It does not have very good insulating properties. But yeah, and then there is another issue common with these sets. That is the thermistor for the filament string to give it a soft power up. This guy sits directly in series with all the tube filaments, and it's about 400 ohms cold and I don't know, 10-20 ohms when it's hot, something like that. It's probably less than 10 ohms. But what often happens with these is they get chipped, and often these solder joints break. I've taken more than one of these sets apart and just found this disc floating around inside. This one is still there, but it's damaged and well, it's about to break off. Oh, I see, the solder joints failed. Alright, enough of that. This filter cap looks to be pretty nasty. Otherwise, it's pretty stock. Oh yeah, here's the other huge problem, common Achilles heel with these sets. Tube filaments don't add up to 120 volts or 117 volts they used back then. So there's a filament dropper resistor here, big old sand power resistor, very often corroded and open, and the outer coating flaking off, actually rusted. So I seriously doubt there's continuity really through anything in this set. Alright, what else we got? Well, we got the top side. Oh, and down here are some other potentially useful parts. That is the high voltage rectifier socket. That is a filter choke, I think. And that is a vertical output transformer. And that is the audio output transformer. All good stuff to have. And top side. Go. With control, there's the voltage doubler, damper tube, the yoke plugs into that socket. I did get the yoke on the picture tube as well. That's the IF stuff. Rarely any issues with it, but it looks to be in really good shape. There's a circuit board under here with a few parts on it. And this is the meat of the set. It's the main board. It's the one that you always hear people saying it's such a big hassle because you have to undo all these wire connections, unsolder a bunch of grounding stakes to get the board out to really work on it, or you do what somebody's done in this case, which is you work on it from the top. You clip out the old parts, you make some spiral curly cues out of your new parts, stick it onto the old leads and solder it in. So at some point somebody worked on this, tinkered with it, got it working. But yeah, so this tube is, well, I can see why it's gassy. It's completely broken off at the base. That tube's also gassy. That tube's gassy. So I'm not quite sure what happened to this set over the years, but it looks like it got kicked around a little bit. But yeah, main board here. Yeah, there's a few tubes that aren't very hard to get. Some value there. The main value to me would be these transformers and coils. You can get reproductions of these couplates. The resistors and caps are fairly standard values. You can get replacement tube sockets. That coil handy to have too. It's a horizontal oscillator coil. And then there's the flyback, which are also very hard to come by, but luckily, let me put the camera down. Huh, that was on so snugly, and this strap is so stress-free. I'm thinking this may have never been opened before. Usually these sides get chewed out from somebody sticking a flat-bladed screwdriver in here to pop it open. And as it gets open, this little grounding thing gets fluxed like crazy. Whoa, that I was not expecting and I've never seen before. That's a replacement. Huh. I'm used to seeing the original, which typically has a lot of cracks in the coating, which really isn't an issue, but a lot of people think it is when they see it, and they see, oh, it's melted, it's cracked, it's ruined. Nah, it's just the old wax coating shrinking and cracking over the years. But no, this is a replacement, which also has a crack, but again, no big deal. Bigger deal, though, is this is loose on the core. That's not cool. Could potentially have some broken leads, too, because of the fluxing. The whole thing's loose. Weird. I've never seen a replacement Predicta flyback before. I know from the part number HVO that it's Merit. Merit also used the green insulating donuts. What I find curious, though, is this looks like it's not, and I know people sub in a lot of something that's close, but this looks like it's, by close I mean a close substitution. But this circuit board and the resistor that's on there looks just like a Predicta one, making me think this must be the proper official replacement flyback for one of these. I hope it's good. So that just leaves the picture tube. So there she is. Very similar to the 17-inch, just bigger. And an even shorter neck. Look how short that gun assembly is. It's like half the length of a regular one. But this does not have a design flaw that the original did. I don't know the details of it. I know that they had to do some tinkering to make a gun that short. You know, I think there was some issue with the type of cathode that they ended up using that had a short life. But this does not have that problem. And check this out. So these were often sold as replacements for the 21 EAP4, which ran on a different filament voltage. This is a 6.3 volt tube. The EAP4 is a 2.35 volt tube, which is kind of oddball. So there's about 4 volts difference between the two. So remember that big power resistor I showed you, this guy? The official info or procedure was to short out one of these sections. However, the reality is, back then, average line voltage was about 117. Today, it's like 121, 122. So there's your extra 4 or 5 volts. You don't need to do anything to the set. We've got higher line voltages today. So I never bothered to modify the sets in any way. Alright, so got everything hooked up. Let's give it a whirl. So the seller had no way of testing it, so that's why I said this was a gamble. The only thing I knew about it was damaged. This key is broken off. And there's some damage around the base. But all the pins are there, and it looks like it's still under vacuum, so let's see what happens. we have filament glow. Always a nice thing to see. New shorts, new shorts. Again, the flaky cutoff. Huh. Sometimes seeing that go peg over can be a sign that there's some air in there, and sometimes you could even see glowing blue. Which I do a little bit on this, which I'm not crazy about. However, I do have cutoff control. Usually when they're gassy, that just will be pegged and you can't control it. And it's not glowing blue anymore, so it might just be there's such a strong tube that, I don't know, or I'm just being really optimistic. I'm not sure what the getter was on these originally, but I'm not really seeing one, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. My real test would be to try using it in the center and to let it run for a while. It's a little squirrely. Now, there is another possibility. Just occurred to me. I could have G1 and G2 backwards. Double check that. G1 pin 3. 1, 2, 3. No, I've got them right. I don't know. It concerns me a bit. Well, it's got emissions, and the emissions vary with cutoff, so that kind of is is what you need for a picture tube to work. But yeah, it's got a purple glow. That's it's not a guaranteed bad sign. It's like sometimes you get some fluorescence on the side of a tube, like the glass will glow, but that's going right down the center of the gun, which kind of looks to me like some nitrogen's gotten in there. Well, that sucks if that really is bad. But, you know, probably this base got whacked and one of these pins got stressed and some air leaked in. So, $125 is what I spent on this, and that's how it goes. I say, yeah, I could have brought a CRT tester with me. But, well, I paid it. I was going to honor the deal. I mean, I knew it was untested when I bought it. And I'll certainly get some good parts out of there, especially if that is a good replacement flyback. That's a real nice thing to have. And now we get to see what kind of picture this CRT can make. Have a little fun with that. Anyways, I'm totally happy about getting a good 17-inch picture tube. I had more of a need for that than a 21. Do a life test. Oh man, we'll see what happens. It's got a great life test. The cutoff does work. It is glowing blue. I mean, it seems like now the cutoff is way less squirrely. It's acting kind of well like it should. So it's another thing. I can let this run for a while, and hey, it's not glowing purple anymore. Well, hey, maybe there's a bit of stray gas in there, and the heater burned it up or something. I'll tell you. I'll let this sit a while longer and see if any other strangeness develops. But yeah, now the cutoff. Before I would just move it and then it would kind of jump over. But no, this is reacting like a good tube should. I'm supposed to put it in that black area. And good emissions and good life test. Alright, it's been about 20 minutes, so let's see if things have changed any. Cutoff still working fine. Doesn't seem to be a blue glow. And emissions are rock solid. Well, you know, when I check emissions, yeah, there is still a blue glow. I don't know, like I said, we won't know for sure until I use it in the set. And I'll probably can try it out in that set when I get to it. So I know you guys, a lot of you are interested in Predictas. I got so much Predicta stuff coming up, you're going to get as sick of them as I do sometimes. I got at least 8 lined up to work on, but I've got to get some other stuff done first, like this guy. So please bear with me. Plenty of Predicta content. You know about that set. You don't know about that set yet, but that's going to be a really interesting one. I've got my princess back there from ages ago, which still needs a little bit of finishing touches. And then there's other stuff. Oh, the debutante I showed you guys a while ago. I got a tandem peeking out back there. A buddy of mine, in fact the owner of this GE, said he's got another Predicta for me to work on. There's somebody else in the area who's got a Predicta pedestal that he had restored but it stopped working he'd like me to take a look at. So Predicta's up the wazoo. Oh, and I have another Siesta on top of that one that I'd like to get working. And that one will be interesting because it actually is working as is on its original parts fairly well. So it'll be interesting to compare these two. Alright, well that's going to be it for now. Hope you enjoyed this little look and walkthrough of Predicta anatomy.